NFL draft first round reactions and takeaways. The Jags come right out of the gates. They set the tone trading up for Travis Hunter in the draft, and the Jags sent this year's and next year's first, a second, and a fourth round pick to the Browns for this year's first, a fourth, and a sixth. This was actually the third time in the draft ever that an on-the-clock trade happened between two top 5 teams. And this was, a great move for Jacksonville. You get a two-way player in Travis Hunter. We know all of the information about him. You get a great weapon for Trevor Lawrence to go next to Brian Thomas Jr., and then you get a lockdown corner, one of the better prospects we've seen at the position in quite some time now. And yeah, you might feel like the haul is big when you send a first, a second, and a fourth to basically switch picks, and then you get a fourth and a sixth back. You said also another first-round pick. So you basically gave up a first-round pick, exchanged a second and a fourth, exchanged a fourth and a sixth. So you can kind of hash that out there. But when you look at a two-way prospect like Travis Hunter and what he brings to the table, being that unicorn, can you really put a correct price when you're on the clock top 5 and Travis Hunter is the pick potentially on the board? You're going to have to give it up. So I don't have a problem with the draft haul there. I was shocked that the Browns did not take a quarterback in the first round. I do expect them to take one at some point in the draft, though, whether it's tonight, which is the second and the third rounds, or tomorrow, which will be April 26th, on day 3, which will be rounds 4 through 7, of course. But I was shocked that they didn't take a quarterback. I was expecting possibly Shedeur Sanders. I was expecting, really Shedeur was the pick that I was expecting there, but it didn't happen. So we'll see what unfolds with the Browns. The Saints have Teteroa McMillan stolen right before them at pick number 8. And apparently that wasn't going to be the Saints guy, according to new head coach Kellen Moore. And the Panthers go in, they get a wide receiver, another weapon for Bryce Young, because they saw Bryce Young emerge as that number 1 pick that they picked him to be. He's got his confidence, his swagger, his play style back coming out of 2024. So they did get him more help. I thought that the Panthers were going to go defensive end. If you guys been keeping up with the show, you saw that I said the Panthers' first-round draft target should have been a defensive end. But nonetheless, they end up going for Tet McMillan. And we saw the Saints last year had Brock Bowers stolen from them by the Raiders before they end up getting Taliesin Fuaga. Speaking of my New Orleans Saints, they make a boring but understandable pick with Kelvin Banks. We're going to have a whole conversation about this later, and to keep this segment from stretching much longer than it needs to be, we'll get into the full explanation later. But it was a boring but an understandable pick. The Saints did not have a great O-line last year. Now, yes, that was because of injuries, but I think this shows a little bit that they are buying into what they have in the quarterback room. I don't like it as a fan. I'm not really feeling Spencer Rattler, Jay Kaner. We know what's been going on with Derek Carr as well. The Saints have always built from the inside out. 10 of the last 12 years, they've drafted a lineman. 6 of the last 7 years, they've drafted an offensive lineman. A lot of the fans, and myself included, we wanted to see a sexy, flashy pick. I wanted Shedeur Sanders here. See a lot of people saying they wanted Jalen Walker or Michael Williams. But the Saints have always built from the inside out. And, Kellen Moore felt like new coach, new regime, offensive-minded, outside the building, everything that we wanted to check on the box for the head coach. But Mickey Loomis said, we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. So I think that's why there's a lot of discrepancy about this pick from some of the fans for New Orleans. And the Saints actually did have a conversation with trading up with the Tennessee Titans in the first round. Wasn't anything real, but apparently from Adam Schefter, there was, quote, dialogue between the teams, so take for that what you will. Tennessee insisted on it, and they ended up going and just picking Cam Ward, which was the right thing to do. I think the Bears reached really, really hard on Colston Loveland. Are we live on YouTube? Yes, we are. Wait a minute. Okay. I was just making sure. Let me go check real quick. Sometimes I'm thinking about switching over from Restream to, okay, yeah, we are. I'm thinking about switching over from Restream to StreamYard. There's just a couple of things with this program that, as I've used it over a couple of years, I feel like it'd be some improvements. Anyways, I think the Bears reached pretty hard on Colston Loveland, especially at number 10. I think Tyler Warren was the pick here if you're going to go with tight end. And when you look at, I had Elijah Arroyo, I had Mason Taylor over Colston Loveland. So I do think this was one of the bigger reaches in the first round of the NFL draft. And I just think Tyler Warren would be much better for Caleb Williams and for that offensive identity and scheme that new head coach Ben Johnson is bringing to the table. The Atlanta Falcons absolutely won the first round of the NFL draft. They go and get Jalen Walker. They go and get James Pierce. Yes, you give up a first rounder for James Pierce, but James Pierce was the only other prospect in the draft that resembled what what Abdul Carter could bring to the table. James Pierce is going to be elite from day one, more than likely. He comes out of the SEC. We see the Falcons already comfortable early on, picking another, elite defender in Jalen Walker out of the SEC. And then you combine this with Leonard Floyd as well. Just wait for that Falcons pass rush and defensive line to really be something to deal with. And the Falcons do send the second and the seventh rounder also, of course, next year's first to go up and get James Pierce. It is a little steep because you feel like when you get James Pierce at, 23rd, 26th, y'all don't crush me on that, but I know that they traded back into the first to get James Pierce in the 20s. There's a chance he would have been available at day 2. I don't know what the Falcons' actual day 2 draft picks are. I'll actually go take a look real quick just so I can be a little more versed on that. The Falcons don't have a second round draft pick, actually, looks like, probably because they traded it away last night. So they felt like James Pierce was the guy they had to go and get, and I respect it. Again, a lot of people are trashing this pick, but when you look at the 4 of the last 6 years, the Atlanta Falcons have been the bottom 2, so we're either the worst or the second to worst team in the NFL in sacks. It's been an issue. If you look at Grady Jarrett, if you look at Vic Beasley in the past, maybe a little bit of Tack McKinley, yeah, you got some players there, but the Falcons have never really had a true edge rusher like what they passed on a Dallas Turner in the past and other multiple prospects that I thought that they should have went and got a defensive line. They didn't. They've been heavy in free agency and, just in the offseason, but not in the draft. They go get 2 premier linebacker / edge and edge rusher and James Pierce and Jalen Walker. I think they absolutely stole the first round of the draft. This is great for Atlanta. I think they're going to be getting after the passer at a high level this coming year. They've already got some solid guys on the linebacking core and within the secondary as well. I thought they were actually going to get Will Johnson right here. As a Saints fan, hate to see it, but I'm glad we got Taliesin Fuaga and Kelvin Banks to put up with these guys on the pass rush. I was really shocked that Shedeur Stewart went over James Pierce to the Bengals. I really felt like James Pierce was the perfect pick to go to Cincinnati. I feel like he resembles a little bit of Trey Hendrickson, can bend, can be really finesse, great technique, can get out of the way and just flat out get to the quarterback. Would have been a great compliment. Shedeur Stewart, still solid. Didn't have him in my top 5. Y'all might think that's crazy. I had Jack Sawyer, Nick Scorton over him. Obviously, Michael Williams. Y'all probably think that's crazy within itself. But I was shocked that Shedeur Stewart, instead of James Pierce, went to the Bengals. When you look at the fact that the Bucs got Emeka Egbuka, Mike Evans, and now Chris Godwin. Oh, my goodness. That is a insane receiving core. I had Emeka Egbuka as the number 1 receiver coming into the draft. I just like his play style better, not taking anything away from Ted McMillan. Excuse me. But Emeka Egbuka is going to be insane in this offense. He could be the one. Mike Evans could be the one. Chris Godwin could be the one at any time. More help for Baker Mayfield, of course. It shows that they're planning for the future, though. Mike Evans at 31. Chris Godwin is 29. They're both still playing at a high level. They're both still one of the better, wide receiver duos in the NFL. But Emeka Egbuka here, great pick. I love it. Was a little surprised by it, but I'm not going to be mad about it at all. Jahdae Barron and Patrick Surtain are going to fit perfectly together in Denver. They're going to be contending for the best secondary and, one of the better, if not the best defenses in the NFL. They're going to have something to say to the Philadelphia Eagles about what they're building over there. Jahdae Barron was the Thorpe, I want to say is the Jim Thorpe winner. Yeah, because Biletnikoff is a receiver. Jim Thorpe Award winner, voted as the best defensive back in the country. Loved what he brought to the table on tape. It was him, it was Travis Hunter, it was Will Johnson. Obviously, Travis at 1, Jahdae Barron probably at 2, Will Johnson at 3. So, great technique at the corner position, and just what a pick to go on the other side of Pat Surtain. Amarian Hampton and Najee Harris, I think, are going to be a really solid 1-2 punch. Now, I thought Dylan Sampson or maybe even Travion Henderson could have went here. I just personally like those 2 running backs over Amarian Hampton. I didn't see a lot of people talking about Dylan Sampson. I think Dylan Sampson is going to be very good in the National Football League. But we saw, Amarian Hampton on everybody's draft boards as RB1 or RB2. I personally think he was outside of the top 5. At highest I saw him was RB2, but I don't know how you say he was better than Ashton Jeanty. But him and Najee Harris are going to be a solid 1-2 punch. Jordan Love finally has a legit, surefire, proven wide receiver 1. Finally. No more Dontavian Wicks. No more Jaden Reed. No more Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, injuries here and there, inconsistencies. Can they really mesh with the offense? No. You just went and got Matthew Golden, who is an absolute speedster, can flat out fly out of Texas and played as well as he did with Quinn Ewers as his quarterback. Now he is with Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur in Green Bay with one of the better franchises in the NFL. And Jordan Love finally has, this feels like the best wide receiver maybe that Jordan Love's had the opportunity to throw to. I mean, seriously. I don't think he got the chance to throw to Devontae Adams. If he did, please excuse my ignorance, but I want to say Devontae Adams was already gone. So Jordan Love getting Matthew Golden is going to be great. They're going to be one of the top connections in the league. I personally cannot wait to see what happens with the fit with this team. Very happy for Jordan Love. Matthew Golden as the number one, if not number two receiver, number three, top three receiver in the class for sure. He landed in a great spot. What a New York Giants thing it was to do to trade back into the first round for Jaxson Dart. Kind of copying the Houston Texans from a couple years ago, not nearly landing the type of player and quarterback CJ Stroud to Jaxson Dart, because we see a few years ago at 2 and 3, you go CJ Stroud, you go Will Anderson. And then this year at, what was it? Was it 3? They pick a 3? At 3, you go Abdul Carter. At 26, it was, you go Jaxson Dart. Was not a fan of this pick. I really wasn't. You trade a second and 2/3 to move up to get Jaxson Dart. I had Jaxson Dart as a number 5 quarterback coming into the class. I do feel like I'm underrating him and sleeping on him a little bit because he did play in the SEC. He is the 4th ever player in SEC history to have 12,000 all-purpose yards as a player. But I just didn't like him being picked here. I didn't think he was worthy of a first-round pick. I don't think he is a real true passer of the football and efficient reader of defenses. And I think he's getting a lot of hype because of that Georgia win, which I watched every snap of that game. Jaxson Dart looked good in that game. He did. I'm not going to lie to you. But I don't think that made him worthy of a first-round pick. I don't think it did for him what it did for CJ Stroud when CJ Stroud played against Georgia before the national championship. And CJ Stroud elevated himself to the top of the draft like that. Yeah, people already had him high on their draft boards, but he went number 2 because of that. And clearly Jaxson Dart was able to jump back into the first round because of kind of a similar situation. I don't agree. This is one of the bigger reaches of the draft to me. The Giants wanted to go and get Cam Ward. They offered the 3rd overall pick, next year's first, and quote, a bunch of other picks or a slew of other picks. That probably consisted of another first, because you got to think, if you're trading up to number 1, it's probably going to cost you 2 firsts, if not a first and, 2 seconds, 2/3, something like that. But if you're on the clock, I can only imagine what it would really cost you. So for the sake of conversation, because I think everyone could agree, the Giants were willing to go to number 1 for this year's first, next year's first, and probably the first the following year to go get Cam Ward. So I can't blame them for that. If you think Cam Ward is that type of talent, then go and get him. By all means. I do think Cam Ward was that good, so I got respect for the Giants for wanting to possibly do that. I do hate to see Will Johnson fall out of the first round due to injuries, his knee, and I think he had some other wrist injuries as well that, a lot of people were kind of worried about. I did think Will Johnson was one of the best corners in the draft right there next to Jahdae Barron. Not as good as Travis Hunter, though, and I really hate to see him fall out of the first round. Whoever gets Will Johnson is getting a great corner. I've had rumors of my Saints being able to get him. The Saints were possibly going to go get him at 9. Now he is going to be a day 2 and on pick. He's going to be a lockdown corner in the league. Coming out of the University of Michigan, I think he had 3-4 pick sixes in his Michigan career. Both of his interceptions last year in just 6 games. Both of those went 4 touchdowns. I don't believe he gave up a touchdown in coverage. If he did, it was only 1, maybe 2. I'm trying to recall some of the numbers that I ran through for Will Johnson when we covered him as a prospect earlier on the channel, earlier in the offseason. But I really hate to see Will Johnson fall out of the first round here. And, again, whoever gets him is going to get a really good player. I think the Bills reached pretty hard on Maxwell Hairston. He had the fastest combine time, I think, at a 4.29. I would have liked Trey Amos or maybe even Ben Morrison here. Maxwell Hairston is a good corner, but I just don't think he compared to some of the other guys. Like I had Trey Amos at 4. I had Ben Morrison at 5, Jahdae at 3. Jahdae at 2, Will at 3, Travis Hunter at 1. So I just thought there were some other corners that could have went here, but again, whoever picks up Trey Amos and Ben Morrison are going to get some very solid corners there. The Eagles did go and draft another premier SEC defensive player. No surprise there. They go and get Jahad Campbell. And I liked how they traded with KC, kind of like a middle finger move, like, hey, we just beat your ass in the Super Bowl. Now I'm about to trade up in front of you and get a premier player. Kansas City was probably going O-line anyways, but to get a player of the caliber of Jahad Campbell out of Alabama, one of the top players at his position, and only give up a 5th rounder and swap just one spot back to steal him, or one spot forward to steal him from Kansas City, I kind of just thought it was a big FU move, which is cool. I've got no problem with it. Wait for Howie Roseman to rub it in and just keep the defeat of the Super Bowl still going along. Again, I think the Atlanta Falcons were 100% the first round winners of the NFL drafts. Let's talk about some steals and reaches and then get to a couple more topics here. I thought the biggest steals of the draft were James Pierce and Jahad Campbell. I didn't expect either one of them to fall as far as they did. I thought Ibuka went pretty late in the draft as well, with him being my number 1 receiver, an elite guy. I thought Golden falling to 23 within itself was crazy. And then Jahdae Barron, he probably was mocked around the spot he was in, but for him to go first round and then also for him to go of all teams to the Broncos, just thought it was an absolute steal. Some of my reaches here in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft: Colston Loveland, y'all heard me talk about that with the Bears. Maxwell Hairston as well. I would have rather had either Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor over Colston Loveland at 10 for the Bears for the tight end position, or Trey Amos, Ben Morrison from Maxwell Hairston instead of rather for the Bills taking Maxwell Hairston. Of course, I talked about Jaxson Dart, and then Shamar Stewart also being reaches as well.
Hey, it's AJL here. Appreciate you sticking to the end of the video here on YouTube. You could have chose any other show, but you chose my video, and for that, I'm very grateful. If you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media. Hit the bell on the channel so you never miss a post. Check me out on all social media platforms. Right here, you'll find a chance to subscribe to the show, a related video, and a playlist. See you guys in the next one.